Thousands of Confederate soldiers embarked on Illinois, but not in battle. They came here as prisoners, and some never left. We take a look at the notorious Camp Douglas, which is difficult to do because there's barely a trace of it left. To bring the past to the present, curators are anxious to preserve homes, battlefields, and fighter jets. But it is not unusual for a dark chapter of history to be seemingly erased. You can find Camp Douglas in a history book, but when you drive by the site today, there's no reminder because it's a chapter of history that casts the victors in a horrible light. The story is not lost, it's just hidden. After the Battle of Fort Sumter, President Lincoln needs states to train volunteers in places like Camp Douglas, notorious for how prisoners are treated.
Some of them froze to death. One of the soldiers who tried to eat snow because there was no clean water was shot.
The camp is named for the man who owns much of the land here, Senator Stephen Douglas of the famed Lincoln-Douglas debates. Here is a map of the camp. Cottage Grove is on the east, 31st is on the north border, 33rd is the border on the south, and Forest Ave on the west. You would never know it today. This is where the entrance to Camp Douglas would be, on the east side of the camp. There's a park here with a basketball court, some condo buildings. If you went to the south side of where Camp Douglas would be, you'd see this, a shopping plaza with a grocery store. Yet what happened here should not be forgotten. Camp Douglas was designed for 6,000 prisoners. At one time, there were 12,000 here. It became more dangerous than the battlefield.
Because of the close quarters, there were a lot of communicable diseases that just went through the camp. There was tuberculosis and cholera and dysentery and smallpox.
Author Kelly Pucci says some prisoners starve.
Why would you want to spend money on food for Confederate soldiers when you've got, your own boys to feed? And one of the worst offenders was Ninian Edwards, who was the brother-in-law of Abraham Lincoln. And just because, keep it all in the family, he got a contract to supply meat. And the meat was rancid, and people died, and people got sick from the meat. So
Lincoln engaged in nepotism.
Yes.
Were there any consequences for his brother-in-law?
A stern warning about not doing it again. Not much.
1 in 5 prisoners die here, so it's no surprise that many try to escape.
The police officers of Chicago got a reward for picking up an escapee. So if you could convince somebody to escape and then send him to a bar downtown, show him a good time, and then collect a reward for him, sure.
Punishment is severe, locked in the dungeon or hanged by the thumbs. A successful escape would need help from high places.
There was a plot to let the prisoners escape, and there would be warships on Lake Michigan and everything. But Alan Pinkerton, who was the first private eye, he got word of it, so he infiltrated the camp, and that was the end of that. But they had to postpone the Democratic Convention for a while. Former Mayor Morris, who was a Southern sympathizer, was behind it, and he eventually went to prison.
The prison? Mayor Morris is confined in Camp Douglas. It becomes a bit of a tourist attraction.
You could take the railroad out to the camp, have a picnic, and chat with the Confederate prisoners.
Why would they want to do that?
I guess there was not much else going on in Chicago during the war. It was just an oddity.
Well, I guess that was the closest that Chicago came to the Civil War,
absolutely.
In a way.
Absolutely, yeah, there are no battles here.
As more prisoners die, another problem arises: what to do with them? Many are buried north of the city, where the lake simply washes up into the marshy burial ground.
The funeral director was paid to bury the Confederate soldiers, and he took the money and then sometimes sold them to medical schools and just didn't put a body there. And some of those washed out also.
The city wants to turn the old burial ground into a park, which becomes Lincoln Park. So what do they do with all the Confederate soldiers buried here? The soldiers are buried 7 miles south of the camp in Oakwood Cemetery.
Oakwood Cemetery was not in Chicago. So no Chicago cemetery would bury Confederate soldiers. So they brought them out here.
So in a sense, it's a mass grave.
Oh, mass grave,
How
absolutely.
many soldiers?
6,000, give or take. Just like sending the live soldiers, making it Chicago's problem, dead soldiers were also Chicago's problem.
So what evidence is left? A photographer takes photos of Confederate prisoners so they can send home. When a 2-penny tax is levied, some photos are left behind. After the war, the photographer's studio burns in the Great Chicago Fire, so most of those images are lost to history. The only remaining structure that is here during Camp Douglas, the old soldiers' home. During the war, it serves as a hospital for soldiers, and after the war, it's a home for disabled Union veterans. Today, it's owned by the Archdiocese of Chicago. To erase any trace of the camp, the land is developed for housing. Groveland Park still exists.
Groveland Park is also on land that was owned by Stephen Douglas. It has a little house that looks like Hansel and Gretel's house. You know, it's where the gatekeeper would be. Beautiful parks, and it's meant in perpetuity, so they're not building lots of new houses there. It's beautiful.
But the most poignant reminder is 7 miles away. You may not grieve for soldiers who rebelled against the Union, but in the confusion of Camp Douglas's horrible conditions, there are 12 Union soldiers buried alongside them, their identities unknown. It's another horror of war. Like the walls and dungeons of Camp Douglas, identities disappear forever without a trace. Kelly Pucci's book is called Camp Douglas, Chicago's Civil War Prison.
And this is the excitement of Monte Carlo in miniature.
And now we're looking at a backstory biography.
With cars you and your kids can actually drive with electric speed controllers.
I remember these electric racetracks from the 1970s, but didn't realize they had been around for so long. The first electric slot car sets were made by Lionel in 1912.
The roughest, toughest, most realistic cars on the road.
I love the vintage cars in this one from Gilbert Toys from the 1950s. But this set has a twist. You can also switch out the hot rods for horses.
Just like that, your Gilbert car track can become a horse racetrack. With these
The Gilbert Toy Company no longer exists, but you'll still see it mentioned on toy packages. Why? Well, let's look at the backstory. The company was started by this man, Alfred Carlton Gilbert. He worked as a magician to make money to attend Yale. He was quite an athlete. He broke the world record for consecutive chin-ups with 30 and set the distance record for running long dive. He won a gold medal at the 1908 Summer Olympics for pole vaulting and set 2 world records. He even invented the pole vault box. His toy company is no more, but the toy he invented still exists and sometimes bears the Gilbert logo.
The all-new Gilbert Erector sets in these all-new 1963 packages.
The Erector set.
Tools they own.
And now you know the backstory. Coming up on Backstory, we'll show you spectacular scenes from one of the most consequential naval battles in history.